Check, check. There it is. Whoa. That sounds real deep, man. It deepened my voice. All right. Well, we want to thank everyone for coming. This is the Choose to Change Foundation. And I'm going to read our intro that we read every meeting. So my name is William Ryan, and I am a proud member of the Choose to Change Mentoring Program. The Choose to Change Mentoring Program is a self-supporting Christian-based group sponsored by the Choose to Change Foundation. There is no fee to attend this class. However, we do encourage donations from our members and to anyone else who also believes in what we're doing. So if you're watching online and maybe you're not here, you can also leave a donation if you are being blessed by these classes. And the only requirement to be a member is a sincere desire to change your life. That is the only thing that we require here at the Choose to Change Foundation, because we are on a mission, right? We're here to restore families by inspiring, challenging, and equipping men to become better fathers, husbands, and leaders in our community. So if you're ready to change your life, you're in the right place. And through this program, you're going to learn some very practical things on, where to start your life-changing journey. You're going to learn tools and resources, right, to keep you going, and a support system to help you reach your goals. And this program believes in 3 key principles in life. So if you get anything out of today, it's these 3 things. One, it's we believe in the life-changing power of God through faith in Jesus Christ. Secondly, is we believe that God has already done His part, right? The work's been done already, but you have the responsibility to learn and to do your own part as well. And the last thing is that success or failure is a what? It's a choice. All right, you guys have been listening. It's a choice. That's all it is. Either you're going to choose to succeed or you're going to choose to fail. Whether you do, it's all up to you, and the choice is simply yours. So if you're ready for tonight, everyone say, I'm ready. Awesome. Well, tonight is going to be very different probably than what we're used to. I am a preacher of the Word of God, so it's going to be styled like that. And if you just happen to brought your Bible, I'm going to be reading out of Hebrews chapter 11, verses 13 through 22. And the reason why is, really any self-help book that you find on the shelf, anything you look at, they're all going to contain principles that are found in the Bible. These are all things that, again, anything you read, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, some books by Jim Rohn or Zig Ziglar, they all reference the Bible. Why? Because, again, everything revolves around the Word of God. And if we want to change our lives, then the best place that we can look at is simply the Word of God, right? He's given us words of life. Jesus said what? He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes unto the Father except through me. And if we want to change our lives, we must go to the life-changing book that is the Bible, which is what we're going to be looking at. So Hebrews 11, verses 13 through 22, if you're taking notes. But before we get there, I want to tell you a story about a man. He was a father. His son was Nate, and he took him to a local cemetery there because Nate, he's a high school kid. He's about to start college, and just like every teenager, this young boy, he's all about his Xbox, all about, chasing girls. His hormones are raging. He's hungry like every teenager. And, and he lives in the culture of the immediate, right? He's about to go off to college, and his father says, I want to impart something lasting into my son, Nate. And I want to give him that sense of urgency and opportunities for his life. And, he's explaining Nate when they get to the cemetery. He says, look, I want us to walk around the cemetery. We're going to walk in silence, but I want you to observe and just look around and just share with me what stands out to you afterwards. So, they walk around the cemetery, and afterwards they come back. They sit on a large rock. And the father tells his son, he says, hey, so what did you see? Nate replies, man, I saw people that died that were a lot younger than I was. And he says, okay, what else did you see? He's like, well, I saw wives that were buried next to their husbands and vice versa, and one died before the other. And I wondered, hey, did they ever get lonely? And now Nate's father's like, okay, good, we're getting somewhere with this kid. He's starting to be more aware. And he says, well, what else did you see? Now he sees his son being more aware. And he says, well, some of these people were from the 1800s. And he says, which is like an eternity for me. And I wonder what life was like for them. And finally the father says, son, one thing you're going to notice about all these tombstones and all these people that are there is that their tombstones contain two dates. Their birth date, and it contained the date that they died. And he says, and in between those two dates, there's a little dash. And he says, son, your whole life on earth is going to come down to that little dash. And he begins to press, more towards his son. He says, Nate, I have a question for you. And he says, yeah, son, yeah, dad, what's up? He says, well, the question is, Nate, what will your dash be? And the son replies and says, I don't know, Dad. And he says, I guess I'm still trying to figure it out. And, the son's reflecting on this moment. And he says, Dad, what do you think makes a great dash? The father replies, that, my son, is the greatest question a person can ask. So the question I have for all of us this evening is, what will your dash be? Right? Because we're all going to die, right? The Bible says that it is appointed once for man to die unless you're Pastor Roman, right? And then face judgment, right? We're all going to die one day, right? We all have a birth date and we all have a date that we're going to die. And what matters is that little dash in between those dates on our tombstones. And what will your dash be? And the text that we're going to read this evening that I'm going to speak about is dealing about the faith of the patriarchs, about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And, and all these men have, a thread in common, and that is that they left something for their children. So pick it up here, Hebrews 11:13 through 22. It says, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured by them. They embraced them, and they confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind the country which they had come out, they would have had an opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. This is what I want us to pay attention to. Verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, who had received the promises, offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he received him a figurative sense. And by faith by faith Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. In other words, they hadn't seen that yet. By faith Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshiped leaning on the top of his staff. And then by faith Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. So here we see a common thread, right? Each one of these men did exactly what their father did, right? Their father Abraham blessed his son, and then his son Isaac blessed his son Jacob, and then Jacob blessed his son Joseph. So here the father imparted something into his children because he understood the necessity. I have to leave something behind for my children. So the three things we're going to look at if you're taking notes is, one, what is a living legacy? And secondly, what will your dash be? And thirdly, the benefits of a living legacy. So let's look at, first of all, what is a living legacy, right? A living legacy, simply put, is leaving something behind so that we could have lasting impact after we're gone, right? This is what that little dash on your tombstone is going to represent. That when people think of your life, they're going to think of, the things that you've done, whether that be good or whether that be bad. Here are some examples, right? We all know, who knows who Thomas Edison is, right? What is he known for? Just shout it out. He invented the light bulb, right? We all know what he did. What about Alexander Graham Bell? Does anyone know who he did? The telephone, exactly. What about Alexander Fleming? This is like extra if you know who this is. He invented penicillin. So the next time you get a bacterial infection, thank Alexander Fleming. That's what he was responsible for. Now, some of these people you may not know who they are, but we know what they left behind. Right? We all use the light bulb, right? We all use the telephone, right? We all at one point have used penicillin. So we may not remember who these men are at times, but we know what they left behind. What are you leaving behind? When we think about your children, up until this point in life, what have you given your children? What have you given your family? And this is why sometimes, we get to this point in our lives where we say, you know what, I'm gonna change my life. I'm going to choose to change, and I'm gonna go to choose to change classes. But sometimes we can be discouraged because we look at our past and think, God, how can I change anything? Or how can I make a difference? I've squandered 30 years, 40 years of my life being a drunk, being a drug addict, being, as my father-in-law says, a loser. How can I do anything? And this is where we have to learn to look beyond. Okay, yeah, you've done all that, but now that you're here, you can make a difference. It doesn't have to be the same, that you have to be able to see beyond your current circumstance if you want to make a difference, right? This is what the great men and women of the Bible, they were no different, right? King David, we all know King David's story, right? Here he is, he commits adultery, commits murder. He battled with those thoughts afterwards. I mean, just read the book of Psalms. He was full of guilt, remorse, but he had to look beyond those things and said, you know what? I'm going to change my life. In our text, these men had to look beyond. It says in verse 13 that all these men died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured by them. So if you didn't catch that, it's super encouraging because it says they all died in faith. In other words, God had given them promises, but yet they didn't see those promises fully fulfill in their lives. They understood God has promised us the following. In Genesis 12, God gave Abraham the promises, which was one, I'll make you a great nation. I will bless you. I'll make your name great. You shall be a blessing. And through me, all the families of the earth will be blessed. And we know that they didn't see all these promises fulfilled in their lifetime. But it still says that they heard, that they knew the promise, and that they lived their life assured of them. And it says that they embraced it. In other words, they were thinking of the future. I may not have all those things now, but you know what? My future generations will. See, tonight, you may not have everything you want in your life right now. Let me even tell you this. You may not even achieve everything you want in your life. Right? And I know that's difficult to grasp and to hear sometimes, but this is the reality pill. You may not have more money in your life. You may not get that better job. You may not, have all these things that you are wanting to achieve in your life. But you know what? Your children might. Future generations might. And it's all going to be predicated on the choices that you make today. That you have to understand, I'm going to strive for these things that I want. I'm going to strive for, yes, a better life. God, I'm going to strive to get a better job to support my family. But you know what? If I don't become a millionaire, I'm content with that. As long as I can pave the path for future generations, as long as my children are set up, then you know what? I'm encouraged for that. I can embrace that promise. It's exactly what Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph had to do. They said, I understand I may not see all these things, right? I may not see Israel become a great nation, but you know what? My children may. My children's children might. And I'm going to embrace that because I'm going to live my life in a way such that they can achieve those things. You know, Abraham was 75 years old in Genesis chapter 12 when God gave him all these wonderful promises. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great. Everyone in the world is going to be blessed through you. He was 75 years old when he received that promise. And then finally, when one of those promises were fulfilled, does anyone know how old he was or how many years passed? He was 75 years old when he gave the promise. Anyone know how old he was when he finally received one of them? He was 100 years old. Yep. 25 years went by before he saw just one of the promises fulfilled. And matter of fact, he couldn't wait for the promise. He slept with his maidservant, Hagar. And his wife, he said, hey, babe, this is what's going on. And she was like, well, why don't you sleep with Hagar? And he says, babe, that's a great idea. What's very interesting, though, this is not in my sermon, but it's very, very interesting that God, again, gives him this promise to Abraham saying, hey, you know what? You're going to have all these things. And then later on, it says here in Genesis 16, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had bore him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abraham, see, now the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her. So Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Be careful with any crazy idea your wife has. And she needs to be careful with your crazy ideas too. No, but what's interesting here is that it says specifically that Hagar was an Egyptian maidservant. And he sleeps with her. And then who is his generation enslaved to? The Egyptians. In other words, could it possibly be that because Abraham couldn't wait for the promise, sleeps with his maidservant, who happens to be an Egyptian, now his entire offspring are enslaved to Egypt for 400 years? Be careful when you try to take shortcuts in your life, trying to get to the top of the mountain. It may not always work the way you want it to work, or it may not always be the plan that God has for you. And sometimes, we get discouraged. Here's Abraham who waited 25 years to get one child. 25 years, that's a long time. I don't know, and in here, we come to Choose to Change classes. All right, I came to one Choose to Change class. Nothing's changing. What the heck? And we get discouraged. We can't wait 1 week. Well, how did he make it 25 years? How did he make it his entire life, not seeing all his promises? One, it says in our text that it says they had seen them afar off and were assured by them. They embraced them and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. It says that they embraced it. I looked up that word embraced in the Greek or in the Hebrew, and it literally means to salute. In other words, they saw the promises afar off. When you see a friend that you haven't seen, you say hi to them, right? That's the same thing. Hey, how's it going, buddy? Hey, you're saluting them. You're far away, but you know what? I'm acknowledging you. That's what these men did. They say, you know what? I know the promises of God are far off, but you know what? I'm acknowledging them in my life. And I'm going to do what I can so that one day my children can receive those promises in their life. So the question is this evening, the main question for today is, what will your dash be, right? We know Abraham, by example, he left behind faith for his children, right? We know this because Romans 4:16 says, therefore it is faith that it might be according to grace, that the promises might be sure to all seed, not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. This is where we get the term. He's the father of our faith. So this is what he left behind, right? And we know through his exampleship, his children picked up all these same they picked up this trait of having faith, right? Our text, verse 17 says, by faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And then it says, by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob. And it says, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed Joseph and his children. And then by faith, Joseph, when he was dying, did the very same thing. You know, faith is something hard sometimes, right? Because you're having to believe something that you can't entirely see. You know, manifesting in that moment, you just simply what? You have faith. Gotta have faith this is going to get better. Gotta have faith that by coming to choose to change, things are gonna get, you know, if you come to these classes with zero faith that your life is gonna change, or if you don't even want your life to change, it's not going to change. You know, Abraham did something that's, you know, very difficult. As when God asked him, hey, I want you to lay down your son Isaac. When you read it, when you read the story, when God asks for Isaac, it's actually very, I find it quite funny. When he says, Genesis 22, he says, then he said, now take your son. And then he says, your only son. He's very, you know, by this time, you know, Esau is already born. And God was very specific. I want your only son, whom you love. And here he is, you know, he's willing to sacrifice him. And what he's saying is, he's like, God, you know, if you read the text, he says, you know, I know through my son Isaac, you've promised me the following: to make me a great nation, to bless you, to make your name great. You will be blessed, all the families of the world. You see, all of those promises that God gave Abraham, they are all linked to Isaac. Without Isaac, he can't have any of those things. And then he's thinking, but you want me to sacrifice him, but that doesn't make, how am I going to sacrifice Isaac and then all these promises be fulfilled? They're all linked to Isaac. I can't, you know, it doesn't make sense. But nonetheless, he says, this is the faith that Abraham had. It says, by faith, verse 17, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, whom he received the promises. Again, all these promises that we listed out, offered his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God, this is the kicker, this is why he was able to do it, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. In other words, he knew, God, if you want me to do this, I'll do it, knowing that you're going to have to raise Isaac from the dead. This is because you've given me a promise. Your promises are yes and amen. Therefore, I'm going to do this because I know you can raise Isaac up from the dead. Right? Sometimes we come to Choose to Change class and say, hey, you have to die to self. Well, if I die to self, how can I live? You have to trust the process. You have to be willing to put your flesh to death every single day. And his faith produced action, right? He had faith in God. And because his faith was so great, it produced action, leading him to, you know, put his son on the altar. Even if that action didn't make sense, right? To some of you, these Choose to Change meetings don't always make sense. Why do I have to come every week to Choose to Change? I'm only here so I can get my paper signed and that's it. Why do I have to come every week? Do I really have to call in, you know, to Orlando? Do I really have to do all these steps, like these, you know, desire, attitude, mindset? Like, why can't I just get over here already? What's the point of doing all these things? Do I really have to come to church? Do I really have to read? But we say, oh, but I got faith. My life's going to get better. But that's the problem. You're all faith and no action, right? You have to follow through with action. I read a story about a man, a 67-year-old carpenter, Russell Herman. You can check him out. He died in 1994. And in his will, he included, man, these staggers of all these bequests, everything that he was going to leave behind. In his will, included distribution more than $2 billion to the city of St. Louis, another $1.5 billion for the state of Illinois, $2.5 billion to the national forest system. This is in his actual will. And to top it all off, Herman left $6 trillion to the government to help pay off the national debt, which we need help with right now. And we hear that and think, how does this guy have so much money? Like, this doesn't make any sense. How can he be so generous? And the only problem was his only asset was a 1983 Oldsmobile when he was dead. That's all he had. Right? Here he is. He makes all these grand announcements, right? But there was no action to back it up. Right? All his promises were absolutely meaningless because there was no action to back it up. You can say, you know what? I want to change my life. I want a better job. I want a better marriage. I want my finances to get better. I want to be a better person. I want to get married. I want to do all these things. But the problem is, it's all want with no substance, right? There's no action that follows. You can want those things, but what are you doing? Are you making steps to get to those things? But so many people are left here in desire, right? They finally came out of the hole. God, I want to change my life. God, I want to, all you are is desire. No substance. So what does it take? It takes sacrifice. You get one other thing, sacrifice. You have to learn to sacrifice. Right? Just like Abraham. We have other examples as well, right? Look at the cross. Jesus, his ministry was leading up to sacrifice, right? He preached, he taught, but at the end of his life, he was willing to pay the ultimate sacrifice. It's all about moving forward. That's what sacrificing does. It advances your life, right? If you read the Bible, all the writers of the New Testament, with the exception of John, they all died brutal deaths. I mean, these men were killed, tortured. Peter was crucified upside down. Paul shipwrecked, stoned. They all died brutal deaths, but we read about them, right? Their legacy continues today. We read about these men. So let's close with the benefits of a living legacy. One of the benefits is you now become an example for other people to follow. And not only that, but people can be inspired by your life. They say, you know what, if that guy could do it, man, I could do it. I'm no different. One thing we have to always remember is that we are all human beings, right? We all have the same amount of time. I get 24 hours a day. You get 24 hours a day. What we do with those hours, though, is entirely up to the person, right? We all have the same capabilities, but not all of us are willing to make the same sacrifices. We look at other people's lives and think, man, you know what? If I was like that guy, if I grew up on that side of the track, or if I did, if my parents were involved in my life, and it's like, okay, you can have all those excuses, but what are you doing now? Right. Now you can have the opportunity to change, but you're so busy complaining about what you don't have that you never move forward with what you do have. Then you can have a life that can impact other people. Because, well, let me rephrase that. Your life is already impacting people. What you're doing now has already impacted your family, has already impacted your children. And maybe you don't like the way it's been impacting it, or if you do like the way, and if you're fine with that, then that's fine. You keep living your life the way you want to live it. No one's going to force you to do anything. But if you're tired of it, you can now change and shift how you impact others. And that change can happen even after you're dead, right? There's some people here. Let me just ask the question. Who here, your father has now passed? Your father's already gone, right? A good majority here. But the truth is, your father, even though he's no longer here, he's still living through your life. Whether that be your father beat you and now you do the same thing to your children, his effects are still in your life. You can reverse those things though. Your life continues even after you're physically dead. And inside every human being is a desire to continue on. Right? This is why we have children, because there's something that is inside all of us that wants our legacy to continue. We do this, right? We have children. Right? In the church, right? We want to raise converts. We want to raise disciples, help the next generation. Matter of fact, the other day, I was in church service and I was looking at all the kids, all the young boys that were sitting in the front row, and I took a picture of it because it reminded me when I was in church. And did it somehow get deleted? What in the world? Point is, I took a picture of the church and it had all the church kids. They filled up the entire first row. I took a picture, I posted, I said, man, this is the next generation. In other words, the work continues on. Your legacy continues. I close with this. 2 Kings 13. This is the story of Elijah and Elisha. Do you know that Elisha still had impact even from the grave? The dude's already dead. Like, he's gone. He's not even living anymore. But yet he was still impacting people. Check it out. This is actually really cool. 2 Kings chapter 13 verse 20 says, then Elisha died and they buried him. And the raiding bands from Moab invaded the land in the spring of the year. So it was, as they were burying a man, that suddenly they spied a band of raiders. So in other words, they're burying someone, they see the raiders coming, like, oh man, what do we do? I don't know. And it says that they threw him in the grave. It says, so they put the man in the tomb of Elisha, and when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood on his feet. That's wild. That Elisha's bones brought a man back to life by touching him. See, if you haven't read between the lines, your living legacy can leave something behind for other people to touch, even when you're gone. It can bring life back into them. That can be your legacy. But the question is, are you willing to make the sacrifice? Or are you too busy stuck in desire with no action? That is the question today is, one, what will your dash be? And what are you leaving behind for others? Right? If you're here, then obviously you want to change, you want to better your life. You want to do things differently because you're like, I've been living my life this way, or maybe you just want to improve yourself, whatever the case may be. Always be conscious of, every decision I make affects my children, affects my family, affects my wife, it affects my coworkers, my friends around me. And if you're conscious about that, you're more aware of what you're doing. And let me tell you, that'll change your life if you're willing to make the sacrifices. That's all I have. We're gonna take a donation. Again, you're not required to give. This is totally voluntary. I'm going to be giving through the app there. I think Daniel has like a little thing you can scan. That is how I'm going to give. If you're watching online, you can give that way. This is really cool. You simply put your phone on it, you click it, and then you can give online that way as well. I want to open up to questions. Anyone have any questions or comments they want to throw in here before I close it up? Or you can, again, comment or just fire away. I'll do my best. Everyone good? We're all good? Yes, sir. Unfortunately, I am not the creator of the chart. It is Orlando. But if we have anyone that's ever taken notes that has it, does anyone remember what it says? I know it's like desire and then like mindset or attitude. Okay, so it's desire, right? You want to change your life, and then you're gonna have faith. You know what? This is gonna change, and then from faith we move on to what? Is it no? Is it mindset? And then your mindset dictates what your attitude, right? And then your attitude goes into your what? Habits, right? Your habits build your character, your lifestyle. Your lifestyle goes into results. So really, your lifestyle can probably coincide with character. And best put, your character is not who you are in front of people. Your character is who you are when you're by yourself. It's who you are when no one's watching. That's who your character is, right? Because we can look good in front of others, but your character is who you are when no one's watching you, right? Are you gonna stay on that channel, right? Are you gonna be browsing through those websites? Your character is what's gonna help you for the long haul, right? Your character is what at the end is right before results your lifestyle. Why? Because that dictates a lot who you are when no one's watching. Because you can come to choose to change, right? You can come here because either you're forced to or because whatever the case may be. But if your character is not changing, then you're never going to see results because you're going to be the same thing, But really, your character is who you are when no one's watching you, and that's what dictates a lot. Is can you still follow the steps and do make the right choices when no one's watching? Because we're all good at pretending. We're all good at just doing what needs to be done so people can stop calling us. I'll go choose a change so no one can call me. But can you come because you want to come? Right? Can you make right choices simply because you want to do the right thing? I remember my father-in-law actually gave me some really good advice right before I was dating my wife at the time. We're courting her, and I remember him sitting me down, and he says, "William," he says, "all I want you to do is live for righteousness." And it got me thinking, and righteousness is simply doing the right thing. That's all it is. And I remember, that was 11, 12 years ago. And I remember like that stuck with me like forever. Like that little conversation, that little thing he said, live for righteousness. And what he was saying again was simply just make the right choice. May not always be the easy choice, but if you make the right choice, you're going to do okay. And that's what change is all about, is can you make the right choice to achieve, the later result? Even if you make the right choice, it may not get you there immediately, but you know what? You're one step closer. That's all it is. Any other questions or comments anyone want to throw in? Hopefully. Uh, all right. Well, again, I'm glad you guys were attentive. This I had a feeling it was gonna morph into like a serious men. It just whooped everybody. But you know what? That's what it takes. Sometimes that's what we need to crucify the flesh. So that's all we have. We're dismissed. Thank you all for coming and for being here tonight.